Welcome to Cineights, where you get to know the best movies and series. Today's video is about top 10 best classic movies, ranked according to Rotten Tomatoes, according to Ranker. I hope you enjoy this video. Be sure to watch until the end because I'm sure you will like it. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Psycho, 1960, with his legacy as the master of suspense, continuing to endure decades after his work was released, Alfred Hitchcock can only be viewed as the unequaled master of psychological thrillers. One of the many films that solidified that indelible reputation for him was 1960's Psycho, which follows Marion Crane as she steals money from her employer and goes on the run, staying at the Bates Motel where her disappearance prompts her loved ones to investigate. A pioneering horror movie still able to warrant scares today, Psycho displays so much of Hitchcock at his best, utilizing the tempo of the edit and the screeching score to make the famous shower scene one of the most iconic sequences in cinematic history. A brilliant horror movie which, more than 60 years on, remains at the pinnacle of the genre. Psycho is rightfully one of the most celebrated and revered movies of all time. Metropolis, 1927, a dazzling display of early cinema's practical effects achievements. Its visual display beautifully complements its thematically weighted narrative, which remains relevant to this day. Interestingly, the film wasn't celebrated as being a hit upon release, but instead became a true classic many years later. Today it is regarded as being one of the finest and most important silent films ever made. Looked back on as being a work of pioneering genius, Metropolis remains one of the most influential and awe-inspiring films ever made almost 100 years after its initial release. Set in a distant future, it focuses on a stark class divide between wealthy industrialists and mistreated laborers, a divide which becomes volatile when a privileged young man falls in love with a teacher and aspires to help the impoverished against his father's wishes. It Happened One Night, 1934, a work of true movie magic that saw director Frank Capra at his absolute best. The brilliance of It Happened One Night cannot be overstated. It follows a spoiled socialite who, having married to get out from under the thumb of her father, falls in with a scoundrel reporter who agrees to help her reunite with her husband in exchange for an exclusive story. As the unlikely duo's romance begins to blossom, It Happened One Night starts to escape its screwball comedy premise and flourishes as the basis of romantic comedy cinema as it is known today. Capra's movie was the first of only 3 films thus far to win the 5 major categories at the Academy Awards, cementing its legacy as one of the greatest films ever made, rom-com or otherwise. Modern Times, 1936. By the mid-30s, film had progressed beyond silent cinema as the increased popularity of the talkies took the world by storm, but Charlie Chaplin, in his final performance as his beloved Tramp, offered ample proof that interest in silent films hadn't dissipated entirely. Viewed by many to be his greatest picture, Modern Times follows a fired factory worker and a homeless girl as they struggle to find their place in a rapidly changing industrial world. While it was imbued with Chaplin's trademark slapstick antics, Modern Times has found an even greater appeal with its thematic focus on the mechanical nature of society's evolution at the time, something he would target again with his famous speech in 1940's The Great Dictator. A powerful masterpiece from one of cinema's greatest ever craftsmen, Modern Times has arguably grown more special in the decades since its release. The Wizard of Oz, 1939. In addition to its industry-changing use of Technicolor, The Wizard of Oz also received high praise for its fantasy storytelling, endearing characters, and its memorable musical numbers. Now remembered as one of the best fantasy movies ever made, the classic won 2 Academy Awards from 5 nominations and, to this day, remains a quintessential classic enjoyed by millions of people all over the world. While color had been dabbled with before in cinema, it wasn't until the release of The Wizard of Oz that it was first used in a feature-length film. As modern audiences, it is difficult to appreciate how impactful the advancement would have been, especially as it went with such a magical adventure, with the film following Dorothy as she is whisked away to the magical land of Oz where she befriends 3 fantastical beings while hoping to find a way to get back home. The Third Man, 1949, with elements of film noir and conspiracy narratives, in conjunction with some of the innovative film techniques associated with Orson Welles' early work, The Third Man is considered by many to be the best British film ever made. The story follows a penniless writer who journeys to post-war Vienna to spend time with childhood friend Harry Lime, only to find him dead. While the film certainly takes influences from the American noir and German expressionism of the time, The Third Man remains a high watermark of the noir genre for its innovation, utilizing techniques like lenses that distort figures in space and cinematography that emphasizes shadows and darker tones in a stylized manner. The Third Man is not only a great film, but an important one. All About Eve, 1950. While perhaps not the most well-known or influential film on this list, there's a strong case for All About Eve being the funniest. It deals with themes of insecurity around aging and the ruthless ambition of people in the entertainment industry and those who want to break into it. Quintessential movie about actors, it also explores the rivalry between Hollywood and Broadway at the time. All About Eve tells the story of aging actress Margot Channing, who meets Fan Eve Harrington and initially embraces her until she is ultimately exposed as a threat, maneuvering herself into Margot's life and threatening her career and relationships. All About Eve satirizes the obsessed superfan before the word stalker even existed and was ahead of its time in many other ways. Citizen Kane, 1941. This movie has been picked apart and studied by film students for decades and is usually covered within 6 weeks of any higher education on the art form. There's a reason for this, though, as everything from the camera work, the staging, the mise-en-scene, all combine to create what is still seen as the definitive example of how to tell a story with film. Citizen Kane isn't just influential, it is necessary to understand what cinema is. Giving an upstart radio presenter whose biggest claim to fame at that point was a prank where he had convinced his listeners of an alien invasion was a gamble for RKO Pictures. But it certainly paid off as Wells went on to film Citizen Kane, a movie that is instrumental to the cinematic language we take for granted. Casablanca, 1942. Hollywood has always been a business, and the tug-of-war between art and commerce has been perhaps more pronounced in this industry than in many others. While it is difficult to make a film that has both artistic merit and big box office appeal, now and then, a film comes along that seemingly, without effort, walks that line to perfection. Casablanca is one of those films. Set against the backdrop of World War II, it follows Rick, a world-weary nightclub owner who finds himself in a difficult position when his former lover Ilsa begs him to help her husband, a renowned resistance leader being pursued by the Nazis. Perhaps Hollywood's quintessential film about love and loss, Casablanca is beautiful, heartbreaking, and a true classic. Singin' in the Rain, 1952, the unparalleled and seemingly tireless song and dance man Gene Kelly presented some of the greatest movie musicals of all time as a songwriter, choreographer, and star, with Singin' in the Rain a legendary highlight from his illustrious career. From Adolph Green and Betty Comden's dazzling screenplay, the film follows a silent film star who falls completely in love with a chorus girl as he and his eccentric colleague struggle to transition to the new era of talkies. It was a spoof of the tumultuous period during the late 1920s when Hollywood was transitioning from silent to sound. It was also reflective of the contemporary as Hollywood was shifted to color. But what stands out most about this film is the joy conveyed in virtually every scene, with Singin' in the Rain's titular song and dance routine one of the greatest moments in cinematic history.